joining us today and for gathering here on this rainy afternoon in London for this Invest in India Policy India Summit, one that's very special to us for a number of reasons. The United Kingdom and India enjoy a rich history of trade ties that are over 400 years old. Established in the year 1600 during the times of Queen Elizabeth I. And now, in the 21st century, Prime Ministers David Cameron and Narendra Modi have set out an ambitious agenda to elevate this bond to the next level. And this push is already showing results. In fact, as you all know, with deals in excess of £9 billion signed in just over 24 hours that the two prime ministers met business leaders from the two countries. Now, over the course of the next few hours, we're going to bring you an unprecedented lineup of key policymakers and business leaders, both from India and the UK. Each of these going into detail, really, about the steps going forward, about how the commercial ties between the two countries can be cemented further. We'll also be hearing from some of the most dynamic ministers in both governments. Also the top diplomats and the A-list of British and Indian business representatives. Joining these will also be the key people who keep these commercial ties running day in, day out, financial leaders, deal makers, bankers, and regulatory experts. As the India story is recharged with fresh momentum, influential investors will be telling us what excites them most about India's diverse economy. So to get things going, let me in fact call upon Siddharth Zarabi, Executive Editor at Bloomberg TV India. Over the course of the last 2 decades, Siddharth has been a ringside commentator to the tectonic shifts in India's economic activity, from the fallout of the Asian crisis in the late 90s and the dot-com craze, as well as the revolutionary changes brought in by telecommunications. From multi-million-dollar M&A to complex moves in government policy, Siddharth is one of India's leading business journalists. Siddharth.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Abha. Very warm welcome to all of you this afternoon in London. Thank you very much for being here. And really, this is all about communicating stories. And as a channel, as one of the leading broadcasters from India, that's what we do. We communicate stories and we communicate positivity around Invest in India, around the policy reform, around the impact that this new government is having as far as our country and its policies are concerned. We have a stellar panel of guests here over the course of this evening. You will hear views from diverse people talking about several facets of, for instance, the UK-India trade relationship. The Invest in India story, which has opened up more recently with a whole slew of FDI reforms, the regulatory architecture, the banking reforms, several things done on the policy front over the last 18-odd months to get things going, to get what is clearly a fast-growing economy, perhaps among the fastest in the world, back on track, and to be able to be a key partner, a responsible partner in the overall growth story. India is not just a country that's growing for itself, it's a country that's growing for a large section of humanity, and it makes sense to partner with India and work with India. And as Bloomberg TV India, we're very happy to be here to take this story forward. And I thank you once again for being here, and I'll hand it over back to Abha to come back on stage. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Siddharth. Let me also now call on stage Manoj Ladwa, the founder and CEO of India Inc. Manoj has served as a member of the hugely successful Narendra Modi for Prime Minister campaign, heading the campaign's research, analysis, and messaging team in New Delhi. He's also founder and chief executive of the MLS Group and is recognized as an expert on foreign direct investment into India. And he's just recently signed off on a spectacular event at Wembley. Manoj.
Thank you very much, Abha, for that warm welcome. And I'd like to extend a very, very warm welcome on this cold November afternoon in London to the audience here, but also to the audiences that are watching this live on Bloomberg television across the world, and I believe it's also live being streamed on the internet as well. Last week, we witnessed a historic visit. Historic in many, many ways. But 2 points in particular. One, that it was the first time that an Indian Prime Minister had visited the UK in over a decade. And secondly, Prime Minister Modi is the first Prime Minister to have been born after independence. Both these facts signaled a step change in this old relationship, a change in approach, and indeed a change in attitudes. The relationship is very strong. Its fundamentals are already very strong. The United Kingdom is the second largest investor into India. It accounts for approximately 9% of all foreign direct investment over the last few years. India, in return, is the third largest investor into the United Kingdom, employing over 110,000 people across different sectors in the UK, and the largest employer in the UK's manufacturing sector. The visit of Prime Minister Modi to Tata Jaguar Land Rover underlined a key fact, a key message of this visit, and that Indians are job makers and not job takers. The world should not fear from India's globalization. Indeed, it should embrace the opportunity that India provides the world, and indeed the United Kingdom, to move up the competitiveness ladder. And I think that the visit of Prime Minister Modi started to underline this message. It also underlined two fundamental aspects of any relationship. These are trust and ambition. We saw trust between the two countries enhanced by the signing of a civil nuclear deal. We saw trust enhanced through a raft of measures around counter-terrorism, but most specifically around cybersecurity as well. And $9.2 billion worth of deals were announced, making it one of the most successful visits an Indian Prime Minister has ever made to the United Kingdom. But also, as I mentioned, ambition. And that ambition is about the future. Yes, we have a strong heritage and a strong legacy, but the ambition is about the future, that we cannot rest upon our laurels. And we saw a comprehensive vision statement, and I know His Excellency, the Indian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, will be speaking in a few moments and no doubt give reference to this, but a vision statement about the opportunities that the UK and India will be working on over the coming years. Most significantly, that vision statement included a cooperation understanding on third countries as well, that the relationship will move beyond the geographic boundaries of the two countries, but look at opportunities in Eastern Europe, in Africa, and other parts of the world, and tackling the big problems of poverty, of climate change, and of security across the world, together as partners and as equal partners. I'm therefore very, very grateful for Bloomberg India for hosting us, and indeed to the international law firm Allen Overy for providing us this excellent venue and the excellent inputs in making sure that this event will be a great success. And of course to our banking partners, Union Bank, who last week also announced the setting up of the subsidiary here in the UK, reflecting the strong financial and economic ties and the real boom of economic activity that we expect to see between the United Kingdom and India. So without further ado, let me hand over back to our hosts, and I wish everybody an excellent afternoon and evening of deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manoj. Let me also now call upon Jonathan Brain to say a few words. Jonathan is a partner in the London office of Allen & Overy and chairman of the firm's India Group. He also specializes in energy and infrastructure projects covering oil and gas, petrochem, telecommunications, and several key areas, in fact, of interest, as well as transportation infrastructure. Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all as well on behalf of Allen & Overy and also legal community, I suppose, in London. And what a week the last week has been, with Diwali falling in the same week as a visit by Prime Minister Modi. Really quite an exciting week for us all. I'm sure some of you were at Wembley Stadium, as I was on Friday, to witness our two prime ministers, well, working the crowds, for want of a better word, really. And I think I'm hoping that an event like this can generate the same sort of level of energy and enthusiasm as 60,000 British Indians generated at Wembley Stadium on Friday night. But even if this is, as I suspect it will be, let's face it, a slightly more sober event than that, I think the agenda which our hosts have put together should produce some very interesting kind of insights into the India-Britain commercial relationship as it currently stands. One thing that struck me as I was sitting in Wembley Stadium is what an extraordinary opportunity we have at the moment, actually, these two great countries who not only share a language, but also, and this is close to my heart as a lawyer, share a common legal heritage going back many centuries. And actually that's often underestimated, but very important in the context of people trying to do deals and raise money and so on in each other's countries. Indian companies coming to Britain and British companies going to India face a familiar legal environment. Not a simple one, but at least it's familiar, and it isn't the often quite strange and intimidating environment that companies face when they travel abroad. And that essentially, and I think the two countries in a way, it's often not popular to say this, but are lucky to have legal professions who have long experience of helping foreign companies enter their markets, but also navigate their way around markets, as I say, in a legal environment that is familiar but still complex. And that's what we do at Allen & Overy. We help foreign companies enter into local markets and help them navigate their way around. That's what many Indian and British law firms do, and that's why we're very happy to host you. And I hope that the discussions today will be, in that context, very productive. Thank you.
Okay. Just a mention as well that as we begin shortly the deliberations and panel discussions, if any of you have a question, you could just write it down and just raise your hand, and one of our team will come by and collect it. Do identify yourself, and at some point during the conversation, we'll definitely be asking those questions as well. I'd like to now have both Manoj and Siddharth join us on stage, as well as Jonathan, please, to welcome in His Excellency Ranjan Mathai. If all of you could join us on stage. Mr. Mathai is India's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom and also the former Foreign Secretary, and it's a privilege to have him with us here today. Gentlemen, just before you take a seat, we'd like to, in fact, observe a minute's silence to mark the horrific events that took place on Friday. So if you could all just stand to pay respect, and also to all the victims of terror around the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Abha. Mr. Mathai, once again, welcome. Manoj, warm welcome to you here for what is clearly going to be an assessment of not just the most recent visit, Mr. Mathai, but also of the broader aspects of the India-UK relationship. What I'm going to do today is to first get you to sort of offer us a quick keynote of a few minutes in terms of your assessment of where India and the United Kingdom stand in terms of their relationship, and from there on, we will get the audience involved with questions, and we are also going to step in with some of those questions. Over to you.
Well, thanks a lot for that very, very gracious introduction. Let me also thank your presenter for having started this afternoon on the right note. We live in a world which is full of some of the most grievous challenges. And I take this opportunity to tell this audience what I told my French counterparts when I went to sign the condolence book, and that we fully understand their pain and share in their grief and their steely determination not to be cowed by this event. And I mentioned something which the local media here didn't pick up, which is that you had many places around the world which lit themselves up in the French colors. And we chose Chhatrapati Shivaji's terminus in Mumbai, because that was one of the targets of the most vicious terrorist attack launched from outside India on our shores. Anyway, this is, we live in a dangerous world, so it's actually a great privilege to have been involved with a visit of a Prime Minister to a country where we see eye to eye to such a great extent. And this common vision statement is, I think, a really very great place to start. But just let me, I thought that, I heard about this conference only yesterday, so I did prepare myself a little bit to give this kind of an overview. And I think, on the whole, the impact of the visit has been extremely positive. When I was leaving for here, someone told me that the title of this is this a leapfrog moment? I said, I don't know whether we're going to play leapfrog, but certainly it's a leap forward. If you look at the long personalized discussions between the two prime ministers, both in Downing Street, but more particularly at Chequers, and if you look at many of the substantive and at the same time ceremonial parts of the program, going to the Buckingham Palace, speaking in the Royal Gallery, going to the Guildhall, you see that there's an entirely new partnership that is being carved out between our two countries. And I think this starts with an understanding of global challenges, security, including cyber security, to which Manoj referred, and dialogue on critical areas of the world. And this comes through in that vision statement which we talked about, where we outline an ambitious and transformative vision for global partnership for sustainable progress, prosperity, and security. And each one of these has to stand on its own feet. These are equally three equal pillars: sustainable progress, prosperity, security. That is the vision of our two prime ministers. Manoj said this is the first visit in almost a decade. Well, I assure you, and this is something the two prime ministers agreed on, that's not going to take so long. They've agreed already on biennial fixed summits and regular meetings as often as possible, along with exchanges of their views on the telephone. There's been a new defense and international security partnership which will raise the level of our collaboration in some of these most vital areas. For obvious reasons, I'm not going into details about that. We have, as was referred to, an agreement on partnership for cooperation in third countries, and I think this is very significant. There was a long time when the fact, of India being a recipient of overseas development assistance was the subject of great controversy in this country. We are well behind that, but we are now leapfrogging literally into a new era where Britain and India will work together in third countries, particularly in Africa. we are already a fairly substantial international donor. And after the India-Africa Partnership Summit, which took place just 2 weeks ago in Delhi, where 40 heads of state personally attended, we have enormously expanded our commitments to Africa. And I think it will be a great opportunity for us to work together in this field. We've had a joint statement on energy and climate change, and I think this is another area where our two countries have a raft of things to do together. I was privileged to be actually the one who signed the cooperation agreement on civil nuclear energy, but I also signed an agreement on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and smart grids, so that these are two pillars of the same broad field. I think it's important to also look at, in this context, just how many of these 9 billion worth of business deals actually related to energy, whether it's renewable energy, fuel cells, or in the scientific part of our collaboration, just how much there is a focus on this whole area of energy. I believe one element of this visit will stand out even more strongly than others in the years to come, and that is finance. You might have heard, if you were at Wembley or you saw the telecast, the Prime Minister referred to Brook Bond, to James Bond, to Rupee Bond. You know, that was a very light-hearted moment. But I think it's a very important story which is going to emerge. The Indian Railway Finance Corporation, it has been announced, will launch its rupee-denominated bonds here. And this is a very, very important moment. As PM said, the Indian Railways actually began their journey here in this city, in this part of the city. So I think this is the harbinger of things to come. And it's not just that the UK will have a specific role in the new India Infrastructure Investment Fund. There will be a specific window for the UK there. Our private sector has also now got involved. You would have heard that the HDFC is going to launch a rupee bond. Airtel and Yes Bank are going to do sterling bonds. So I think you're going to see far more engagement both in the public and private sector of India with the City of London. And I think this is going to be very, very significant going forward. I believe the CEO forum which met, it's a renewed CEO forum, will give a real great vigorous thrust to what we can do together in the private sector. And there's an overwhelming emphasis on being practical, seeing what it is in the agenda that is doable, and have a vision but also have a roadmap. That is the kind of direction which our two prime ministers have given us. And I'll give you just one example. Just 10 days before the Prime Minister landed here, not far from here in the stock exchange, we had the India-UK Financial Partnership, which fed into that CEO forum and the visit. And one of the three outcomes there was actually on our two experts working on insolvency in particular. And our people said the first draft of the report was actually used when we were drafting India's bankruptcy law, which will come in Parliament now. Okay. So you can see what I'm emphasizing, just how much of what we do together will have practical results on the ground. Of course, it wasn't only governmental and business. I think if you look at India's flagship programs, smart cities, Britain is going to be involved with 3 of them. Gyan and Skill India, Gyan is the global initiative for academic networks, which was created by PM, is going to bring a large number of academics from the UK to India. Similarly, the British Council has set itself a target of bringing 25,000 British students to India in the next 5 years. The Tata Consultancy Services have agreed to take young British people as for training in India in their offices so they can come back and work globally or with the Tatas wherever they are. So I think these are all elements of a people-to-people relationship which will have great significance. And there's one area in particular I would draw attention to, and that's science and technology. Most of what we do, and it's something like £200 million worth of joint research, which has now been agreed. Most of it is for socially relevant areas: food, water, health, energy. And I think this is going to make a huge impact in the years that lie ahead of us. But we will also have some celebrations. 2016 is going to be the year of culture, and 2016 is India's Technology Summit, in which UK will be the partner. 2017, we're going to have a big, big year of culture. It will coincide with the 70th anniversary of India's independence. And if you want to see one good exhibition, which will give you a foretaste, go to the V&A. Go to the V&A. So I think this partnership is a partnership for the future. There are already signs that other countries have taken note of it, and I think will adjust to it, and it will play a role in how the global balances emerge. And finally, one can't leave this without saying that it establishes very firmly that the Indian diaspora is really India's strongest bridge to any country in the world. And here, let me pay tribute to the Indian diaspora and Britain in particular, and Mr. Manoj Ladwa in particular, for having pulled off that magnificent Wembley event. A great new future, two great countries, one glorious future. Thank you.
Wonderful points there, Mr. Mathai. Let me take up these themes that you touched upon, and I'll bring in Manoj just briefly. The first point, you told us about the Indian sort of expectations and what transpired. If I could ask you to talk about from the point of view of the United Kingdom, what would be the expectations? What is the vision that the UK has for India going forward, since this engagement is now translating and moving into the next level?
Well, I think you really should be asking the British High Commissioner and not me. But let me have a go. I think it is two, three things. They see in India an enormous promise. What they want to see is this promise going to be translated into a reality? Is it going to mean something on the ground? And I think there they came away quite reassured that, broadly speaking, that is actually the case. That India sees Britain as a valued partner. Yes, it does. I think on the business side, there's certainly a hope for faster reform, for more effective reform, for reform that spreads down from the state level to the grassroots level. And on those also some of the discussions we had were, I think, very, very useful. And I think finally they would like to reinforce that sense that our people are actually people who will continue to remain engaged. I think broadly speaking, these are the kind of visions.
Absolutely right, Mr. Mathai. Manoj, before I ask if you have a question to Mr. Mathai, but I want you to come in from the perspective of being the bridge. Since we don't have the British government represented on stage, and since you're the bridge, I'm going to ask you, how has the perception about India changed? And we're asking this question to you in London, where large investors a few years back faced difficulties with some of the tax policies, aggressive tax policies that the Indian government was adopting, and much of it has changed, particularly over the last few months. In terms of the business climate, in terms of the ability or the willingness to do business with India, what's the mood here in Britain?
I think it's a good question, and I think the mood music has significantly changed. If you just look at the body language of the two prime ministers when they were on stage at Wembley and at Chequers, it was very relaxed, very comfortable, but very confident about themselves and about each other as well. And I think that matters a lot. And you didn't see that over the last few years. So there seems to be a real step change, as I referred to earlier on, in the mood music, in the way in which both countries are now looking at one another, comfortable about their past, but confident about their future. And there are a couple of points that I wanted to bring out in this discussion. There's an agreement between the two countries on ease of doing business, a partnership that has been announced, and no doubt firms like Allen & Overy and other English law firms and Indian law firms and Indian accountancy firms and British accountancy will be working together to make it easier to do business in India, which is one of the big stated objectives and one of the big hurdles of the really big ticket investments that need to reach into India. And secondly, which I think has been missed out by the media up till now, is that there has been a setting up of almost a cell that will fast-track UK investments into India through the DIPP. And I think that's quite significant as well, that India sees the UK as the High Commissioner has quite rightly says, as an important partner, and therefore specific attention will be paid to UK investments that are coming in to India and making those investments as easy as possible as well. So overall, the mood is good. It's one of anticipation, but it's also one of, yes, we can make it happen. And Modi's a man that people have confidence in. On the issue of tax, I think there are at least 2 occasions when Prime Minister Modi very clearly underlined the fact that the aggressive tax regimes of the past is of the past. The retrospective tax is a matter of the past as well. And that, I think, was real music to the ears of the institutional investors and the big investors who have previously either been burnt by the aggressive tax regime that was prevalent or have been warned off. I think we're seeing a change.
And it's absolutely right. It's not just rhetoric. In fact, specific steps have been taken. And there's some things which are in the legal domain which take their own time to pan out. Mr. Mathai, the point about the civil nuclear cooperation agreement, I was wondering if you could explain for our viewers and for the audience here, what is it really about and how does it take forward? Because on a broader basis, and let me remind our audience here that Mr. Mathai is one of India's most respected and the finest diplomats that India has produced. He's also handled global policy because he was the foreign secretary. So not just from the UK's point of view, my question really is from the early build-up that we saw for the first agreement with the United States and then a period of stasis, if I can put it that way, to now this agreement with the United Kingdom. How does the big picture look? What does it really mean? What can it translate into down the line?
Well, you mentioned the United States. We actually, I think, after the first breakthrough with the United States, the first agreement we actually signed was with France, and I happened to be the ambassador there at that time. We have had agreements with all the principal countries where civil nuclear industry has a very powerful location and a very powerful part of the industrial process, and they are major exporters. So in that process, many countries have now joined us. It needs to be said that in terms of scientific dialogue, we have never stopped our dialogue even on civil nuclear energy with the United Kingdom. That has continued between the Atomic Energy Commission of India and their counterparts here in this country. What this agreement now adds to is a more larger governmental dimension in that dialogue and the possibilities of being involved with trade in nuclear products, nuclear energy-related industries, without any of the kinds of hindrances one had in the past when you had a lot of regulatory clearances. And therefore, I think it was right to treat it largely as a matter of confidence and trust in each other and in each other's processes, whether these are governmental processes or regulatory processes, so that you can move ahead. It's not as if today in the nuclear industry there's any one country which has a monopoly. There's a seamless interconnection between industries. These are all often global supply chains. So it's very important that you must have agreements with all countries who are likely to be part of that global chain so that your program doesn't get held up at any point in time. And secondly, once we become very substantial players, we'll be participants in the same game. We'll be part of the global supply chain ourselves. We already are in some very big high-tech industries. We are part of the International Thermonuclear Electric Research Project in France. And certainly as our civil nuclear capacities grow, we will also play our role in this.
And clearly there's also been a policy shift, if I may put it that way, the focus on renewables and solar. And currently, if you look at it in the Indian context, the larger number for power addition in India is expected to come from solar, and some of the recent tenders, bids that are coming in are at very low prices, and those prices are being watched across the world with what is happening. But let's move on from there. Let me also take up the other bit about defense cooperation, a natural fit. Some of the wars that India has fought have had a large component of British armaments. There was then a shift away. And now we have, in the more immediate context, a policy that encourages local production within India. And for that, just days before the Prime Minister's visit, the government actually opened up foreign investment, direct investment levels up to 49%. And you, of course, know that on a case-by-case basis, it can go up to 100%. What is the level of interest that we can talk about as far as the British defense industry is concerned and this new opening up and the possibilities of manufacturing in India?
I think there's a great deal of interest, and certainly the Defense and Security Partnership takes note of that. I believe many of the British industries already have a presence in India, and they have now very clearly said they would like to be involved with Make in India in a very, very big way. That is the way of the future. It could be not only Make in India for India, but for global markets. So I think there's a great deal of interest.
Talking about interest, there's also a matter of interest back home, and maybe Manoj, you might want to supplement post Mr. Mathai's answer, and this is to do with student visas. A lot of press that is happening with regard to the almost 50% reduction apparently for student visas for Indian students by the United Kingdom. Was any progress achieved? Have there been discussions during the Prime Minister's visit? Any breakthroughs expected in the near future, sir?
I'll ask Manoj to start on that one.
Okay, Manoj.
I don't know about the discussions, but clearly there's been a lot of angst amongst Indians and NRIs in relation to the current government's policies on immigration. And the message that was coming out within the diaspora and back in India is that, look, the UK is saying we want your business, but we don't want your people. As stark as that, given what's happened over the last few years. One can understand the concerns that the UK has, but if one looks at in its totality the contribution that British Indians make to the UK economy, the contribution that Indian companies who come to Europe and make London the capital, the base for their expansions into Europe, I think there is a special case for a special discussion, let's put it that way, whereby not only students, but in terms of other working visas and so on, needs to be looked at in a very special way for India. Because
were there concerns of abuse also of these visas?
Clearly, there will always be concerns of abuse. Any government and in any country will be looking at that very closely. But then you can't be in a situation whereby if there are a few elements of abuse, you're going to just do a blanket and say no to everybody. I don't think that's where we are with the UK. But I think a lot more work needs to be done because Indian talent and Indian expertise is something that the UK requires, Europe requires, and the UK, for it to remain competitive and remain that strong gateway into Europe, it has to look at these immigration policies much, much more carefully as far as India is concerned.
Let me, since you mentioned the abuse problem, clarify one thing. I think as a government, we would be very happy if abuse were checked. We do not want Indian students to be exploited by institutions which are not necessarily proper educational institutions. In the discussions, both sides did understand, and I think this came through very clearly, that we would like to see the strong educational link between our two countries continue. The whole issue, as he said, is going to be part of a continuing discussion. Mm-hmm. The British side, I must say, it's not a question so much of ever having had any kind of decision on wanting less students. They actually are very keen to have legitimate students come to the UK, and they reiterated that. So I think this is a subject on which we will continue our discussions, and I think we should be able to make some progress.
Okay, let me pick up one more topic in the last couple of minutes of discussion, and this is essentially to do with the broader synergies that a whole lot of, at the global political level, as far as counterterrorism is concerned, as far as cooperation in that area is concerned. India, a country that has witnessed terror for many, many years, and there have been expectations from India by countries like the United Kingdom that they would step up, put boots on the ground, and a whole lot of other strategic elements. Mr. Mathai, at this point of time, how does the United Kingdom look at India's ability to be a partner at the global height table when it comes to counter-terror cooperation and other allied areas?
I think certainly it sees India very much as a very, very strong partner in this. Counter-terrorism certainly was one of the issues which was discussed at some length and with some care. Certainly this is an area in which our two countries will work more closely together.
Okay. Manoj, you want to add any other aspect in the...
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the third country cooperation. And in the vision statement, there was a very clear statement about cooperation at the G20 level. But when one thinks about the UK and India, one of the great legacy institutions is the Commonwealth. I didn't see any mention of the Commonwealth. And so, given your perspectives on this, where do you see India and the UK in relation to the Commonwealth? Is it an institution of the past, or is it something that both countries will work forward to?
No, I certainly did see references to the Commonwealth. In fact, when we spoke even in India before the Prime Minister came here in the briefings which you mentioned, there was a reference to the fact that we are partners, we are countries who work together in major institutions like the United Nations, like the G20, like the Commonwealth, and in various other institutions. So I think that certainly was reinforced.
Okay, that was certainly reinforced. Ladies and gentlemen, please offer a round of applause for the High Commissioner and for Manoj for sparing time with us. It's time for another session.